Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. Here to wish you a very happy Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. And, you know, before we get into today's topic, I would like to share with you one nice little collection piece that I was able to secure this week at one of my local bookstores. This was something that I was very delighted to stumble upon because I was not even aware that this was out there in stores, but it is this magazine that was put together by the makers of Uncut Greats. Present Morrissey. This is something that I'm assuming is available in your town, wherever it is that you purchase your books or magazines. I stumbled upon this at my local Barnes & Noble. Yes, I do shop at Barnes & Noble. You know, I can't help it at the end of the day. I really shop at all bookstores. I do have a tendency to call this room up here my record room, but more accurately, I think it would be described as my book room. I am a person that loves books. I am an avid reader. Now, you know, I know what you're going to say. That seems a little bit ironic coming from you, Jim, considering what an inarticulate asshole you come across as on these videos. And, you know, I'm not really even going to disagree with you on that point, but the truth of the matter is that I am an avid reader, so whenever I have time, I love popping into my local bookstores, Barnes & Noble being no exception. That is where I stumbled upon this. It is something that I was very, very happy to find. I also found it very interesting that they decided to actually use the name Morrissey on the cover. Now, had it been the Smiths, I don't think it would have surprised me as much, but considering, you know, what a lightning rod Morrissey is in terms of controversy, I was a little bit, I would say, pleasantly surprised that they actually did an entire magazine really sort of profiling more Morrissey's solo career than much of the stuff that he did with the Smiths. Now, obviously, the Smiths are covered in this as well, but really, this is a magazine that focuses a lot more of the attention on Morrissey's solo career. I've always sort of found it fascinating, especially over the last, you know, decade or so, the sort of line of demarcation in terms of acceptability between Morrissey's solo career and the Smiths. Now, I will tell you that as much as I do love this, which I do, it is chock full of amazing photography. I will say this. Now, if you are a lifelong diehard fan and you've read the books, you've seen the documentaries, you've read other magazine articles on both Morrissey and the band, I don't know that this particular magazine is going to blow you away in terms of new information, but there is a few articles in here in particular that I do find very fascinating, two of which are the types of articles that I'm always a sucker for. They do a ranking of the top 20 albums in Morrissey's solo career. I remember thinking to myself when I saw the headline for that, I remember thinking to myself, well, 20. That seems like a little bit of a stretch because unless I'm mistaken, I do believe that Make Up Is a Lie is Morrissey's 14th studio album. Now, yes, I'm a person that is willing to concede that a couple of the compilations in Morrissey's catalog are albums that I included when I ranked Morrissey's studio albums. But when I ranked Morrissey's studio albums on the very first episode of Archaic Records a couple of years ago, I included both Morrissey and the Smiths. And I think, even including Morrissey and the Smiths, I don't think I had 20 albums on my ranking. I'd have to go back and, you know, watch that episode, which I have no intention of doing. I do not go back and watch these episodes. So, you know, I have enough pain and agony in my life without having to go back and subject myself to that torture, all right? But it is a little bit interesting. Number 20 is an album that I did not include on my ranking of the Morrissey catalog. That is the compilation album World of Morrissey. Now, that is an album that I very much like. When I did, you know, my ranking for Morrissey, I just did not think that this was an album that, you know, necessarily needed to be included. Number 19 is an album that is a compilation that I did include on my ranking so many years ago. That is the album Swords. Swords, in my opinion, is an album that I am a huge fan of. 2009, in my opinion, was a benchmark year for Morrissey, at least in terms of albums, because earlier that year, he had released Years of Refusal, which in my opinion, now, I would suggest that the jury is still out on Makeup Is a Lie, but I would say that, Years of Refusal is, as of right now, Morrissey's last classic album. Later that year, he released the compilation Swords, which, in my opinion, isn't too far behind Years of Refusal in terms of quality. In 2009, I saw Morrissey in Seattle at the Paramount Theater, and by the time he came to Seattle, I think that it was technically on the Swords tour, unless I'm mistaken. But Swords, they put in at number 19. Number 18 is an album also that I did not include in my ranking. It is the live album, Morrissey Live at Earl's Court. In my opinion, the single greatest tour that I have ever seen in my entire life. Going back to 2004, seeing the You Are the Quarry tour, I saw that tour twice. That was the first tour I ever saw twice. Originally, I don't even know that I was necessarily planning on seeing that tour twice, but the first show I saw on that tour absolutely gutted me. I mean, it literally turned me inside out. I could not wait to go see that tour again, and I do think that Live at Earl's Court is an incredible live record. It is a snapshot of, in my opinion, of all of the shows I've been to in my life, the greatest tour that I have ever seen. Number 17 is Low in High School. I would sort of agree with where this album is in terms of place if you are going all the way back and counting 20, Morrissey albums. Low in High School is an album that, I like enough. I think it is an album that has a lot of jingles on it, but I also think it's an album that is, I do think it has a couple of buckets. Of course, I believe the first single off of that album was Spent the Day in Bed, which in my opinion is still one of the greatest Morrissey albums over the last, couple of decades or so. Probably one of the best songs he did during his modern era. In terms of an album, though, Low in High School is not an album that I necessarily go back and listen to as much as others. Now, I will tell you, compared to 2014's World Peace Is None of Your Business, this was an album that blew me away, because World Peace Is None of Your Business is still one of those albums, even though the album is now over 10 years old, it is still one of those albums that, either I don't really get it or it is going to be the ultra slow burn, because to me, it's one of those albums that I never go back and listen to very often at all. Number 16, they pick California Sun. I think for this ranking, I think California Sun is a little bit low. I do like California Sun a lot. I've said it before. I shall say it again. California Sun for me is one of those albums in Morrissey's canon that is just so hard. Albums, I should say. Did I say songs? I meant to say albums. It's one of those albums in Morrissey's canon, probably the most difficult album to compare to anything else that is in his catalog, because this is the cover album. I did see this tour back in 2019. I thought that the tour was awesome. I was a little bit apprehensive when it was announced that Morrissey was going to be doing a covers album, because in my opinion, Morrissey is the greatest singer and songwriter in the history of rock and roll. He seems to be very prolific, so why it was that he was going to do an album made up of all covers was something that I was a little bit unsure of, but, I should have trusted him, because when the album came out, I bought it immediately. It was an album that I'm very happy with, was very happy with when it came out, still am very happy with it. An album that, to be perfectly honest with you, compared to some of the other albums that came out in that same era, California Sun is one that I still listen to as much as anything else. Now, in terms of ranking it, it is a little bit difficult because it is the cover album. So, in terms of this ranking, I don't necessarily have a problem with it being 16. Number 15 is the album that followed that one up until this past May. It was Morrissey's most current album, I Am Not a Dog on a Chain. That is an album that I like very much, although I will say, actually, we proved it. We proved it beyond the shadow of a doubt on this channel a few episodes ago when we we put this album in the steel cage next to its successor, Makeup Is a Lie. This is an album that is not anywhere near as good as the current album, but when it was released, despite the fact that its artwork is just beyond objectionable, it was an album that I was, and I will say still am, pretty happy with. This is an album that I do go back and listen to a fair amount. I have not been listening to it quite as much as I used to since Makeup Is a Lie has come out. Actually, I haven't really listened to as much of these albums as I usually do at all, any of them, since Makeup Is a Lie has come out, because I am very happy with Makeup Is a Lie. It's an album I feel like I'm still getting to know. That's one of the greatest things about Morrissey is, his songwriting is so complex, it's so multi-layered that it really takes you, quite a long time to sort of get to know these albums inside and out. Dog on a Chain is an album that I'm very happy with. Of course, this was the COVID album. I listened to this album during COVID a lot. This was one of the things I think that kind of got me through COVID. My favorite song on this album is Easy. It is the song What Kind of People Live in These Houses. I've had conversations with people that are Morrissey fans, that will tell you that this is not only his weakest album, but I did have one person go as far as to say that they hated this album so much that they wished it had never been released. That is something that I simply do not agree with. Although I will say that my second least favorite Morrissey song of all time is on this album. That is the song Truth About Ruth. Now, as far as this ranking is concerned, I would say Dog on a Chain being at number 15 seems a little bit fair. I'm going to sort of agree with that placement on this album, with one exception, really. That being that the album they put right above that, number 14, is Ringleader of the Tormentors, an album that when I ranked my Morrissey catalog back on the very first episode on Archaic Records, this was one of the ones that, I put towards the tail end. This is an album that I also did an entire episode on. This is an album, Ringleader of the Tormentors, that, I think it suffered from unfair expectations when it was originally released, following up You Are the Quarry, which is, in my opinion, the greatest album of Morrissey's modern era. The modern era, at least in my opinion, being defined as from 2000 to 2020. And so when it was announced that Ringleader of the Tormentors was coming out, I was just beyond excited. I was literally over the moon. The day that this record hit the stores, I did not walk to my local retailer. I floated. I took this record home. I listened to it, and it just sort of sat there. I did the same thing over and over again, and for many years, this was an album that just really sort of left me feeling a little bit disappointed. Now, in 2026, 20 years after this album entered the marketplace, can you believe that Ringleader of the Tormentors is 20 years old? I'm mad now. This is an album that I feel like I've developed an understanding with. We have a relationship that, is at times a little bit tumultuous, perhaps a little bit fragile, but I feel as if we understand each other. This is an album that a lot of people disagree with me on. This is an album that a lot of people think is one of Morrissey's finest. I simply do not agree. It also is guilty of housing my least favorite Morrissey song of all time. That is the song Dear God, Please Help Me. In 2024, I saw Morrissey twice. Those were the last two shows I've been to as of this point in time, and he played that song, Please God, or Dear God, Please Help Me, in both Birmingham and Indianapolis. I had not seen that song, I don't think, before that, because I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is awesome, because I always want to hear new songs live. I hate this song. Anyway, number 13 is another one that I sort of disagree with in terms of its relationship on this ranking to albums like California Sun and Dog on a Chain, two albums that I do think are better than this album. Number 13 is World Peace Is None of Your Business. This was another album, probably much like Ringleader of the Tormentors, that I found was a little bit disappointing based on its predecessor. That being Years of Refusal. Years of Refusal is and was one of my favorite Morrissey albums of all time, probably my second favorite album of the modern era at this point in time. And again, we're still sort of living with Makeup Is a Lie. I would say that this is the last classic album of Morrissey's career, at least up until now. Years of Refusal is the last classic album in Morrissey's career. So when it was announced that World Peace Is None of Your Business was coming out, it was something, again, I was very excited about. I bought this album the day it came out. Now, I will say that I do think that this album is slightly better than Ringleader of the Tormentors, but it is an album that I think commits a lot of the same crimes. It is an album that doesn't really do a lot. The one thing I like about this album compared to Ringleader of the Tormentors, and why I would agree that this is probably a better album than Ringleader of the Tormentors, is I do really like a lot of the diverse musical influence on this record. I like a lot of the lyrics, but the tempo of this album is just too slow, even for me, even for somebody that is a diehard Morrissey fan. I saw this tour back in 2014 at the Civic in San Jose, California. I will say now, I say this, you sort of have to take it with a grain of salt when I say this, because I have been fortunate enough to where I have never really seen Morrissey play a bad show. I've never seen him mail in a show. Now, that show in 2014 on the World Peace Is None of Your Business tour was probably the closest in terms of the sense that Morrissey kind of got the feeling he did not necessarily want to be there. I don't necessarily think that he was overly inspired that evening. And I've said this before on this channel. I shall mention it again, because at the end of the day, any dead horse worth beating is worth beating beyond recognition. But, San Jose, California is not really a place that inspires me either. So I will say, of all the shows I've seen of Morrissey, that show in 2014, the World Peace Is None of Your Business show, was probably my least favorite, apart from the fact, and again, I thought that the show was good. There's two things I remember most about that show in San Jose. One being at the very end, he came out for the encore and the stage just got bombarded. So Morrissey ended up sort of skedaddling it out a little bit early during the encore, but it really didn't affect the show. It was the last song. And, I've said it before, I think the stage invading tradition that Morrissey fans sort of partake in is cool in a way. It's definitely unique and interesting, but at this stage of the game, I feel like it's something that has just sort of run its course, especially considering, Morrissey is now 67 years old. And I'm not saying that to pick on the guy. I'm saying that because I don't want him to get hurt. And I don't think that Morrissey fans would ever. In fact, I know that Morrissey fans would never deliberately hurt the guy. I mean, we worship him. We are gross. We are drooling fanboys. We would never do anything to hurt him. But sometimes I worry when I see the punishment he takes from some of these people who hit the stage and perhaps are a little bit overzealous, and it's understandable. I mean, he's right there. He is God. You have to lay your hands upon the idol. I understand that urge, trust me. The other thing I remember the most about that show in 2014 was he played the song Asleep. That was something that I literally never thought I was ever going to get a chance to see live. After that, I was happy. He went into that song, and I immediately had to turn on the windshield wipers because I was sobbing, son. Anyway, number 12 on this ranking is Maladjusted. That is an album that I like very much. It is an album that I've always liked very much. Now, 12, I think is pretty good for this album on this ranking of the top 20. I'm pretty content with this album being 12. This is a very sentimental album for me because this was the first tour that I ever saw at the Warfield in San Francisco. Also, the closest that I've ever been to Morrissey at any show. I think I was right in the second row, dead center. My friend and I got to the Warfield super early, sort of by mistake in a way. We had gotten into San Francisco early that day, and as was our tradition, he and I went around and hit a few of the record stores, and I remember specifically that we were at the Tower Records, which used to be on Columbus Avenue, and I overheard a couple people talking, a couple of aisles over from where I was sifting through the bins, and these two guys were talking about a show that they had gone to the previous night. They had gone to see Morrissey at the Warfield, and I immediately panicked. Now, you can think that I'm being melodramatic, but I can assure you that I was not, or that I am not. So what I did was I immediately dug through my pocket, because back in those days we had paper tickets. That is something that, yes, I still miss. And yes, I love the planet. I care about trees. You know, I want this rock to be here long after I'm gone. But I love paper tickets. If that makes me a bad person, I don't know what to tell you. So I pulled my ticket out. And everything was right. The time, the date, the venue, everything on the ticket seemed right. But I ran over to my friend and I told him, I said, hey man, I think we missed Morrissey. I think he played last night. So he and I, what we decided to do was we decided to basically immediately run downtown to the Warfield, find out if we could get the real skinny on what was going on, at which point in time we discovered that Morrissey was, in fact, playing two nights, October 7th and October 8th at the Warfield in San Francisco, California. So we decided, since we were already there, we were just going to get in line. There were a couple of diehards ahead of us in line, and it was a general admission show, and we were able to be right in the very front. When Morrissey came out, and I saw him in person for the first time, I literally could not believe that I was looking at Mr. Stephen Patrick Morrissey in the flesh. I think I was so starstruck that entire night that, you know, I didn't really remember a lot of the show, apart from the fact that I do remember specifically that that was the shortest show that I've ever been to. I think Morrissey played 13 songs at that show, and my friend and I, as we were walking out of the Warfield, now that was the first time I think either of us had ever seen him. I was a big fan. I don't know that my friend was necessarily a big fan, but he asked me, he said, does he always play that short? And I said, I don't know. This woman walking out next to us said, no, he's in a bad mood. I think he hates San Francisco. I remember that was sort of a conspiracy for a long time, that Morrissey hated San Francisco. I don't know if that was ever really the case or not, but that album is very sentimental because it was the first tour I ever saw. For number 11, they picked Kill Uncle. Kill Uncle is the third album I ever purchased of Morrissey's early on in my fandom. The first one being Bona Drag, the second being Your Arsenal. Bona Drag spawned my fandom, and Your Arsenal solidified it. Now, when I bought Kill Uncle, that was a slow burn for me. That was an album that took me many, many years to sort of discover how I felt about it. Now, at this point in time, I love Kill Uncle. In fact, when I ranked my Morrissey albums on the very first episode of Archaic Records, that one actually I do think snuck into the top 10. That is an album now that I absolutely love. Number 10 on their ranking of the Morrissey top 20 albums of all time, solo albums of all time, is one that I totally disagree with, that being Southpaw Grammar. Southpaw Grammar is easily my least favorite album, at least studio album in Morrissey's canon. This is an album that is a little bit sentimental to me in the sense, though, that this was the first ever album I purchased as a new release. My Morrissey fandom was spawned in the in the spring, I should say, of 1994, and when Southpaw Grammar came out, it was the first album I purchased as a new release. I did not see any tour or anything on Southpaw Grammar. Not that I wouldn't have, but I was going to school. I was living in a small town. I was broke. So I listened to the album. It was an album at the time I liked very much, but over time it is an album that has continually dropped towards the bottom of my Morrissey ranking, and now I would say that it lives pretty much comfortably and firmly at the bottom. This is an album that I've said before, I would accuse this album of stretching the Kool-Aid. I think that the fact that there are two songs on this album that are over 10 minutes long, the song The Operation starts off with a 2-minute drum solo, are things that, I don't necessarily think really were necessary. I don't think they're things that complement those songs or the album. Now, I've had people tell me that they think that Southpaw Grammar is one of Morrissey's best albums. In fact, somebody told me recently that Southpaw Grammar was their favorite Morrissey album. They said that this was Morrissey, being a little bit experimental. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that analogy, but hey, or that assessment, I should say. But hey, everybody is entitled to their own opinion. I mean, that is what is so amazing about music. I mean, music is subjective. An album to me, like Southpaw Grammar, which, I don't really ever go back and listen to. It might be your favorite album of all time. I think that is amazing. I think that's one of the fun things about being a music fan. Being a fanboy of a specific artist is having those conversations, having those debates, respectfully agreeing or disagreeing with others when it comes to their opinions. I do not think that Southpaw Grammar is Morrissey's finest work. I don't like the songs. I don't like the production. I don't like the fact that a lot of this stuff is just, overly stretched out. I don't agree with people that say that this was an experimental album. I don't agree with people that tell you this was a prog album. I don't want Morrissey living in the same world as Rush. Okay, now Rush is a band that I can handle when I'm in the mood. When Rush does a 12-minute song, it is something that is semi-understandable, semi-acceptable. There's a lot of things going on in there. Listen to the 2 epically long songs on Southpaw Grammar and tell me and convince me that it is necessary that those songs are over 10 minutes long. I'm listening. I think you've got an uphill battle if you're going to convince me. Number 9 is another live album, Beethoven Was Deaf. Of course, Beethoven Was Deaf is an incredible album. It was reissued not too long ago on vinyl. I love it. Going back and seeing the Your Arsenal tour is something that if I were provided with a musical time machine is something that I would do in a heartbeat. Number 8 is the new album, Makeup Is a Lie. I'm inclined to agree. As of right now, I'm very happy with the new album. We've talked about it a lot on this channel over the past month or so. I think the only 2 weak songs on the album are Kerching Kerching and Lester Bangs. Actually, somebody just told me the other day in a comment that those happen to be their 2 favorite songs on the album. That is awesome. Again, this is very subjective. What means something to you might not mean as much to me, and vice versa. I respect your opinion. To me, Kerching Kerching is a song there's just something about the chorus that just kind of like, I don't know, it makes my spine want to crawl out of my back. And the song Lester Bangs I would accuse of just being kind of boring. Number 7 is Years of Refusal on the top 20 albums of Morrissey's solo career by Uncut. Years of Refusal is an album I just talked about. I love it. It was an album that came out after Ringleader of the Tormentors. Therefore, my expectations, I would say, were a little bit tethered because Ringleader of the Tormentors is an album that, I just don't really understand it. And therefore, when Years of Refusal came out, I was a little bit unsure of what it was going to do. Now, I was sort of hoping it was, at least in terms of quality, was going to be a little bit more You Were the Quarry than Ringleader of the Tormentors. Now, stylistically, I never expect Morrissey to go out and repeat himself because he doesn't. He does not live his life in the rearview mirror. And when Years of Refusal came out, it blew me away. I mean, it was loud, it was clanky, it was bratty, it was bitchy. I loved it. I still do. I listen to Years of Refusal all the time. I mentioned it a second ago. I thought in 2009 I saw that tour at the Paramount in Seattle, but technically, I think it was the Swords tour that I saw. Number 6 is The Best of Morrissey. That is an album that I would in no way include on, my ranking. I did see that tour back in 2002, and one thing I remember about that tour specifically was that he played 3 new songs. I think it was 3 new songs. He played 3 new songs that were eventually going to end up on You Were the Quarry. The first time I had heard any of those songs, and seeing those songs live was awesome. So the tour for The Best of Morrissey in 2002 was probably one of my favorite tours of all time. Number 5 in the Uncut top 20 Morrissey solo albums of all time is You Were the Quarry. To me, it's perfection. I mean, it was the greatest tour I ever saw. It is the greatest album of Morrissey's modern era. There are people that will tell you that I'm an idiot, and there are people that will tell you I'm an idiot because I like this album in terms of Morrissey's modern era as being my favorite. Some people tell me they think it's too generic. Some people tell me they don't like the production. They don't like the songs. You're all wrong. You're wrong. Now, you're entitled to be wrong, but you are wrong. All right? That album is basically perfection. It had been 7 years since Maladjusted came out, an album that I liked. But after You're the Quarry came out in 2004, it blew both Maladjusted and Southpaw Grammar out of the water. Best tour I ever saw in my entire life. Number 4 is Viva Hate. Viva Hate, of course, is an album that I love. My favorite song of all time is Every Day is Like Sunday. You can tell me that I'm a generic piece of garbage. I don't really care about your opinion. That is my favorite song of all time. Viva Hate is awesome. Number 3 is Your Arsenal. Number 2 is Bona Drag, which in my opinion should be number 1. Bona Drag was the number 1 album on my Morrissey ranking. It is not only my favorite album of all time, but it is a very sentimental album for me because, it was the first album that I ever purchased. It was the album that got me turned on to Morrissey. And, in my opinion, it is basically perfect. It is an album that you cannot find one weak second on. Now, there are people that will... they will disqualify this album based on its compilation status. I simply do not agree. Bona Drag, in my opinion, is the greatest album of all time, but on the uncut top 20 Morrissey albums of all time ranking, it gets beat out by Vauxhall and I. I'm not really complaining about that. Vauxhall and I is basically, again, another perfect album. I would say it is the album that sort of, concluded Morrissey's classic solo era because, again, Southpaw Grammar is not really an album that I love. And as much as I do like Maladjusted, you can't really argue that Maladjusted is on the same level as things like Bona Drag, Your Arsenal, Viva Hate, Kill Uncle even, and things like that. So, I think that Vauxhall and I was the last album in Morrissey's classic solo era. Now, there was another ranking included in this Uncut magazine. I'm going to go through this one relatively quickly because we're already chewing up a lot of time here. This one was something that I found to just be virtually impossible. This is a ranking called the 10 Best Songs by the Smiths. How do you even begin to pick 10 best songs by the Smiths? I'll run through them very briefly here for you because I don't want to keep you here all day. Number 10. Barbarism Begins at Home. Yes, that is a song that would probably be in my top 10 Smith songs of all time, in my opinion, for no other reason. And the song is brilliant, perfect start to finish. But in my opinion, it has the greatest rhythm track, bass line in particular, of all time. Number 9, they picked the song Handsome Devil. Again, what is in your top 10 Morrissey songs of all time? Handsome Devil? Oh, I don't know. That one might be tough for me. I Know It's Over is number 8. I think that one could be in the conversation for top 10 Morrissey songs of all time. Number 7 is Hand in Glove, a song that I love. Don't get me wrong, but for me, that is not top 10. Probably not even top 20 in terms of my Smiths top 10 songs of all time. Number 6, Big Mouth Strikes Again. Again, a song that I love. Top 10? I don't know about that. Number 5, William, It Was Really Nothing. That one, again, I haven't written my top 10. I have enough headaches in my life without having to sit down and worry about that task. I don't know about that one. That one would be probably pretty close at the end of the day. Number 4, Panic. Again, top 10? Top 10 Morrissey songs of all time? Are you talking about top 10 biggest hits, or are you talking about top 10 best songs? Number 3, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. Yes, that is a song that I love. That is a song that would easily be in my top 10. Number 2, the same, that being This Charming Man. In my opinion, a perfect 3-minute pop song, a song I never get tired of. That song is easily in my top 10. Number 1, at least according to Uncut, is How Soon Is Now. That is not really something that I agree with in terms of being the best Smith song of all time. Now, I will concede that it probably is the best known Smith song of all time, but making the statement that you think that How Soon Is Now is the greatest Smith song of all time is, to me, it's like saying Let's Dance is the best David Bowie song of all time, Lips Like Sugar is the best Echo and the Bunnymen song of all time, London Calling is the best Clash song of all time. You understand what it is. I mean, yes, How Soon Is Now is a huge song. I mean, how many songs do you think or how many fans, I should say, do you think that song has brought itself into the Morrissey Smiths fan community? I mean, the number has got to be staggering. But to say that it is the best song by the Smiths, I think is, just entirely inaccurate. Yes, it's probably the biggest. Yes, it's certainly probably the most popular. But to say it's the best, I don't know that I necessarily, agree with that. In terms of David Bowie, I would say his best song is Heroes. That is a song, I don't know why, that is a song that almost makes me cry every time I hear it. As far as Echo and the Bunnymen, it's Silver. That's easy. I've said it before. I shall say it again. The Clash, was that the other band I brought up? My favorite song of theirs is Bank Robber. Hands down. Easily. As far as this magazine goes, there is one article, though, apart from the rankings, that did catch my attention. There is a very cool article in here that goes into great detail about the making of the album Meat is Murder. So go out and pick this up. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It should be available at one of your local bookstores / newsstands. It just always reminds me, because I am such a nerd in terms of books and magazines and newspapers. Man, I miss magazines. I miss newspapers. I love reading. I love collecting books. I am just that sort of an individual. I mean, look around at this record room and tell me that you don't think I'm a Hall of Fame collector. Anyway, that is not really the point here today at all. The point is that this week Morrissey released a very interesting statement on MorrisseyCentral.com. Morrissey is a person that is continually, as of late, releasing interesting statements via MorrisseyCentral.com. Now, when it comes to these rants that Morrissey has sort of gotten into the habit of releasing lately, I can't help but wonder if Morrissey is becoming that old man in his backyard yelling at the fence. Now, I'm not going to suggest that Morrissey is inaccurate with the things that he is saying in these statements, because, even the old man in his backyard yelling at his fence is correct from time to time. But what I wonder is anybody really interested in what it is that Morrissey is spewing in terms of these rants? But this week, Morrissey did release a statement that, it did catch my attention, because it started off talking about the release of the new deluxe edition Notre Dame single, which is now officially going to be released on June 26th, according to Morrissey. It is going to include 4 tracks, 3 of which have not been released on vinyl as of yet. So I'm assuming that the 4th track, which he has not announced officially what it is, I'm assuming that it's going to be the album version of the song Notre Dame, something that I'm not complaining about at all. I love that song. The new 4-song EP is going to be released by Sire Records. It is going to be pressed on what they are calling Lemonade vinyl. The album artwork and the vinyl both look absolutely incredible in terms of the aesthetic. The artwork for the sleeve, I would say, is much nicer than the sleeve that he released with the album Makeup Is a Lie, although we've talked about it. I think that the artwork for Makeup Is a Lie is something that has sort of grown on me over time. I was not in love with it when it was first released, but at some point in time I sort of allowed it to, latch itself onto me. It's certainly better than Dog on a Chain, which, at the end of the day, that's pretty much all I was asking in terms of artwork and album, really. I mean, just make the new album as good as Dog on a Chain and make the artwork better than Dog on a Chain, and you and I have got a deal, Steve. Now, this statement that Morrissey released this week goes on after giving us the news from the new release, which is coming out in June, on June 26th. Morrissey also went on to talk about some of his past collaborators. Now, I'm just going to read this a little bit to you because I don't want to paraphrase Morrissey is somebody that is very capable of speaking for himself. He does not need me or anybody else advocating for him. He is the master of the English language. So I will just give you a sort of a quick reading of the statement he released in terms or in regards to some of his past bandmates. It says, "I'd also like to make a point about band musicians who move away. Whether it be Alan, Boz, Gustavo, or just about anyone, all of whom quit because they want to start their own projects. Nobody is asked to leave, and no one was shot at midnight by a French firing squad. And there is never any bad feeling until online bitchcraft creates it." Not exactly sure what bitchcraft is, but I do like that word. I might incorporate bitchcraft into my daily life from now on. "Musicians stay in the M fold for varying long stretches. Boz, I think, gave 30 years. Alan gave 15. Gustavo, a bit more than that. You can't expect everyone to hang on until they are 116 years old. Only I will do that if I perhaps haven't already. Please don't invent stories about musicians being thrown out of speeding cars because it's sheer excruciation. Everyone mysteriously wants to be the singer because the singers are big and beautiful. But no one can be the singer as long as my carcass is blocking center stage, can they? I will agree with that. Mr. Stephen Patrick Morrissey is the greatest singer and songwriter in the history of rock and roll." Where am I at now? It says, "So please stop insinuations that Alan was bludgeoned to death with a toffee apple, or that Boz was defeated in a pie fight. The way Boz is looking nowadays, I would assume that he would not only win a pie fight, but win a pie-eating contest. And yes, I recognize the fact that I'm not exactly Richard Simmons, nor would I ever be mistaken as Karen Carpenter over here. But, I'm allowed to take jabs once in a while, especially after Boz dropped that autopsy Morrissey reimagined on the world last year. Okay. Or Mando died slowly in a hail of bullets, or Solomon and his stomach were removed during a dawn experiment that went wrong. You sort of get where we're going with this. Basically, Morrissey is, taking shots at people that have left his band. Now, I will say, as much as I love all of these guys, all of the people that have contributed to Morrissey's career throughout the course of his solo years, Morrissey's classic band, that being the band made up of Alan, Boz, Gary, and Spencer, that is the band that is my favorite band of all time, apart from the Smiths. So I do understand, that these guys have contributed a lot to Morrissey's career. Now, one thing I will say, now I don't know if this is necessarily one thing that Morrissey is talking about it, but in terms of something that I saw recently, I talked about it on an episode a while back. The fact that the Alan White Band, a band that is made up of all former Morrissey members, including Craig Gannon, they are going out there and they are basically performing a Morrissey show without Morrissey. Now, I don't care how much you hate Morrissey if you are one of the people that sort of, exist in that camp, but I think even the most strident Morrissey defectors, I should say, would have to acknowledge that this feels a little bit exploitive. Don't get me wrong, I love all of these guys, but you would not catch my carcass at an Alan White Band show for anything. I don't want to go out there and watch somebody do a Morrissey show without Morrissey. David Bowie has been gone for 10 years. Why don't we just send him out on tour again with some sort of a replacement? We're seeing it with the Pogues. We're seeing it with Black Flag. We're seeing it with the Sex Pistols. I do not want to see it with the Smiths or Morrissey sons. So I am in total agreement with Morrissey in terms of the former band members, if that is what it is that he's getting at. But what we are going to be talking about today is the last statement that he makes in this release, where he says, "Finally, thank you to everyone who bought Makeup Is a Lie. A certain injustice was rectified." I do agree with that 100%. The follow-up album has been written and will be recorded in January. In our beloved France, it already sounds like a winner. Happy ending, never in doubt. Or was it? This makes me wonder. Now, first off, when I first read this statement, I was very excited. I am very excited about the prospect of Morrissey having completed work on a new album and getting ready to enter into the studio in January. I mean, who knows how long it is going to take for this album to see the light of day. Hopefully now, with Morrissey having what seems to be a relatively good relationship with his current label, and the fact that the new album, Makeup Is a Lie, has done relatively well. I'm happy with it. I think the fans are happy with it. I think the label is happy with it. I think Morrissey is happy with it. Hopefully, this won't turn into a huge melodrama like we went through with the current album. But what it makes me wonder, and this was something I was thinking about, and I think about this stuff for basically a plethora of reasons. One, being that I have no friends. Two, that I have no life. Three, that I have no career. And four, that I have no prospects. So this is what I do. This is what I sit around and think about. I think about Morrissey. I think about music. I think about books. And when this statement was released, as happy as I was that there is a new album in our future, it made me wonder, will Bonfire of Teenagers, the now mythical Bonfire of Teenagers, ever see the light of day? An album that I do believe has officially become the golden plates of rock and roll. Bonfire of Teenagers, of course, was originally announced in May of 2021. The album, which was produced by Andrew Watt and featured contributions by both Iggy Pop and Miley Cyrus. I remember when I saw that Iggy Pop was going to be a contributor on the new album, Bonfire of Teenagers, this was something I was very excited about. I mean, who does not love Iggy Pop? If you are not a fan of Iggy Pop, I suggest you wander down those stairs right there before you get thrown down. Iggy Pop is one of my heroes. Iggy Pop is, in my opinion, one of the most important figures in the history of American music. Iggy Pop is somebody I had an opportunity to see live 3 times. The first time I saw Iggy Pop, it was literally a life-altering experience. It was something that I still talk about with anybody that is willing to listen. The next 2 times I saw Iggy Pop were pretty much equally the same. I mean, I walked away every single time with my jaw dragging behind me. Now, have you seen what Iggy Pop is up to now? Have you seen his current state? It is relatively sad. I would make the argument it's time for Iggy Pop to move on. Now, I realize that Iggy Pop is a god. He is a legend, and I am nothing. I am scum. I'm the dog mess on nothing's shoes. I understand that. But I think it's time for you to go now, Iggy. I think you've stayed at the party a little bit too long. The only thing you're accomplishing at this point in time, as far as I can tell, is crapping on your own legacy. But when it was announced that Iggy Pop was at least contributing vocals to the new album, this was something I was very happy about. I cannot tell you that I felt that same emotion when I realized that Miley Cyrus was going to appear on Bonfire of Teenagers. Now, of course, eventually Miley Cyrus would demand that her track be removed from the album. I can assure you, when that news came out, I wasn't sobbing, son. Don't you love it when somebody horrible thinks that they are punishing you with their absence? I can tell you, I could not have removed her from an album quick enough if you paid me. Miley Cyrus is somebody that I just absolutely despise. I try so hard not to be negative on this channel when it comes to music, but Miley Cyrus, you've got to be kidding me, Steve. Why? What could she possibly contribute to an album? Anyway, Bonfire of Teenagers was, right after it was announced, as I'm sure you recall, immediately being peacocked by Morrissey himself as his finest work. He released a statement about Bonfire of Teenagers. Now, I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it written down exactly, but I remember that the statement read something to this effect. The worst year of my life has produced the greatest album of my career. Now, in terms of worst year of his life, I'm only able to sort of assume that he is discussing COVID. Now, yes, COVID was something that was relatively difficult. I can't believe that COVID was already 6 years ago. But yes, COVID was something that was difficult. COVID was something that was hard on a lot of people. My wife and I had to move during COVID because we were struggling. We were working in an industry where we were not allowed to work for over 4 months, and based on where we were living and what we were paying to live there, it just became unrealistic for us to stay. So we ended up moving out here to Nashville. The reason why we ended up in Tennessee was really for a couple of reasons. One, because we had been to Nashville a couple of times on holiday, and yes, Nashville is a nice place to live. It is, it is a great music town, but really, why we ended up choosing Nashville was because this was a place that we were able to work. That is why I think a lot of people from California, Chicago, New York, landed in this general area. Whenever it is, I encounter locals here who hate California. I don't know why it is, but people out here in Tennessee have just turned California into the boogeyman. I always want to tell them we had to go somewhere. Unfortunately, California has sold its soul to the highest bidder. And many of us, people who are from there, I'm a native. I am a California son. But unfortunately, the state has no use for us. They only want to bring in people that can afford to live, afford to pay rent and buy houses that are just criminally overpriced. If you'd like, I can take you back to where I lived in my last place in California, and I can show you what I paid to live there. It will make your hair fall out. That's what I want to tell the people here in Tennessee that hate California. Hey, we're refugees. Okay, we weren't wanted back there. We can't afford it. They don't want people that aren't in the 1%. Now, unfortunately, that is something that is happening out here in Nashville, and it's something that I hate. Nashville has gotten so expensive now that a lot of the people that are from here can no longer afford to live here, and it breaks my heart. Being a Californian, being somebody that got priced out of the Bay Area, it breaks my heart. I hate that. I understand why it is sometimes people don't like New Yorkers and Chicagoans and Californians, but I can assure you, as many dickweeds as there are in California, there are just as many out here. Dickweeds and humanity have a tendency to go hand in hand, so people always criticize Californians for being jerks, being rude, being dickweeds. I can assure you, living out here with the maggots and the Bible thumpers, there are plenty of dickweeds in this general geographic region as well. So yes, COVID was difficult on a lot of people. My heart bled for people that were struggling during that time, people that did not know what they were going to do, people that were in fear of losing their jobs and losing their housing. Yes, I had empathy. I don't necessarily have empathy for a pop star who is sitting on $50 million at some exotic locale, writing it out. I had the same issue with other people in the entertainment industry. People telling us serfs how we should live our lives. I don't remember seeing any of them living paycheck to paycheck, unemployment check to unemployment check. Morrissey was somebody that during COVID, the way he was whining and bitching about it, I found it to be somewhat irritating. I don't think that Morrissey is a person, though, that is really capable of empathy. I don't think that Morrissey is somebody that is capable of looking at others in that way. Morrissey is the type of person. I believe that the world ends at the property line. And, at the end of the day, that isn't his right, but that is his right, I should say. He's under no obligation to care about humanity, care about his fans, treat us with respect. Now, you'd like to think that Morrissey would have a little bit of an appreciation for the people that put him in the station that he's in life, but I just don't think that that is his get down. I don't think that he plays that game. So for Morrissey, calling COVID the worst year of his life, man, I just have a hard time sympathizing. But, when it was announced that Bonfire of Teenagers was coming out, I was very excited. Of course, Morrissey had been on a string, really, of releasing a ton of albums in a relatively short period of time. I mean, in 2017, we got Low in High School. In 2019, we got California Sun. 2020, we got Dog on the Chain. And supposedly, Bonfire of Teenagers was going to come out not too long after that. So I remember thinking to myself, wow, 4 albums in like 6 or 7 years. That is going to be crazy. I don't know that Morrissey has ever really had, apart from, maybe the classic era or going back to the Smiths, I don't remember an era of Morrissey's career where he was ever so prolific. But also, when it was announced that the album was finished, it was announced by Morrissey, who at the time was unsigned, that the album was available for whoever was going to be interested in being either the highest or lowest bidder. I, at the time, did not necessarily think that this was just going to become a big headache, a big melodrama like it did, but I thought that with Morrissey peacocking this album as his greatest work, coming off a string of a few, I think, relatively good albums, I thought that there would be somebody out there that would be interested in working with him. It wasn't until late summer in 2022 when it was announced that Morrissey had reached an agreement with Capitol Records to release Bonfire of Teenagers, and a tentative release date was set for February 23rd, along with releasing the new album, Bonfire of Teenagers. It was also announced that the deal with Capitol Records included licensing rights for the label to reissue other Morrissey albums such as Southpaw Grammar, You Are the Quarry, Ringleader of the Tormentor, Years of Refusal, and World Peace, all on vinyl. This was something I was very excited about. I am a collector. Whether or not I have these albums already on CD and vinyl, if they are reissued, that I'm going to be picking one up in November of 2022. Morrissey released the first single off of Bonfire of Teenagers, a song called Rebels Without Applause, a song that I loved and I still do. In my opinion, it was one of the better new songs that Morrissey had released in quite some time, and if it was going to be any sort of indicator as to what this album was going to be sounding like, I can tell you that my appetite was very well whet after that. A month later, in December of 2022, it was announced that Morrissey had been dropped by Capitol Records and that the label had planned to retain the intellectual rights to the album. On Morrissey's website, he countered by claiming that he had parted ways with Capitol Records voluntarily, citing their fascist behavior as the reason. In February of 2023, Morrissey announced that he had finished work on a second album, an album that at the time was going to be called Without Music, the World Dies. At this point in time, I remember thinking to myself, now we've been on this Bonfire of Teenagers soap opera for 2 years. By this point in time, I'm beginning to get a little bit tired of this song and dance. My patience are wearing thin, and I'm basically thinking to myself, all right, at this point in time, either put the album out or just stop talking about it. Stop whining about it. Self-release the album. If nothing else, you have the means to self-release this album. If Bonfire of Teenagers is as good as you say it is, get it out there. The fans want to hear it. I wanted to hear it. I don't have any idea why you're releasing a second album that's just going to end up sitting in the can forever while you've got this album that you're still fighting with the industry over. In October of that year, 2023, I saw Morrissey on his fall tour here in Nashville and out in Memphis, Tennessee. Those were two shows that were exquisite, in my opinion. Not necessarily the greatest shows I ever saw, especially the show out there in Memphis. Morrissey and Memphis did not necessarily get along with each other, but on that tour in 2023, I was very excited to see if there was going to be any material off of Bonfire of Teenagers played live in particular. I was very interested in seeing the song that had been released as the single, Rebels Without Applause. I love that song. I still do love that song. To me, that song is, it's the jugs. And on that tour in Memphis and Nashville, Morrissey did play one song off of what was going to be the new album, a song called, of course, The Telephone Rings. This is a song that I have seen live 4 times now. I absolutely do not like this song. Now, it is possible that the studio version of this song is going to be much better than what it was that I saw live when I saw this song 4 times, but it is a song that did absolutely nothing for me. A few days later, after Morrissey skedaddled it out of Nashville, he headed up to the Northeast to complete his 2023 fall tour, and he told Fox 5 in New York City in an interview that basically Capitol Records were holding his record hostage, but had offered to sell it back to him at an undisclosed price. Basically for the remainder of 2023 and basically the first quarter of 2024, you didn't really hear much of a peep out of Morrissey. It seemed as if he had gone into hiding. That is until April 2024, when Morrissey announced that he had successfully purchased back the rights to Bonfire of Teenagers from Capitol Records, along with the rights to his 2014 album, World Peace Is None of Your Business. Now, what this made me wonder, now, I don't know the answer. I still don't know the answer. I've tried to find the answer, and I simply can't. I acknowledge the fact that I'm a dumb guy. I'm a dullard. I understand that. So if you know the answer, and you've made it this far into this video, I would love if you could sort of answer it for me. Does that mean, because when Morrissey signed to Capitol Records, that included licensing rights to reissue Southpaw Quarry, Ringleader, Refusal, and World Peace? The fact that he was able to buy back rights to World Peace, does that mean that Capitol Records now still has rights to Southpaw Quarry, Ringleader, and Refusal? That I don't know. That is something that I do not know. So if you know the answer, I wouldn't mind if you chucked it into the comment section. But I was very I would say I was cautiously optimistic by this point in time that something was finally going to happen. Morrissey was at least going to get out there and have an opportunity to peddle his wares. In November of 2024, Morrissey comes back to the U.S. for a fall tour. I see that tour twice. Once in Birmingham and once in Indianapolis. Those were the last 2 shows that I've been to at this point in time. Now, those 2 shows in 2024 I thought were very good. Not quite as good as the shows in 2023. I saw that tour twice. I saw it early on in Birmingham. The show in Birmingham was very good. I thought that Morrissey and the band were engaged. I thought they were energetic. I thought they sounded good. Later on, I saw the second to last show of that tour in Indianapolis, and you could tell that both Morrissey and the band were feeling a little bit worse for wear. Morrissey himself announced that, he was not necessarily feeling his best. He said, I remember he made a joke saying that he had Flint throat. Not exactly sure what that was. He had come from Detroit the night before. He was en route to Chicago. The show in Indianapolis, I thought, was adequate. Not my favorite show I've ever seen, but certainly not the worst. The thing that was memorable about those shows in 2024, though, was it reminded me of the tour back in 2022 when Morrissey on the Best Of tour played 3 new songs off of what was going to be You Are the Quarry. In 2024, Morrissey played 4 songs that were supposed to be on Bonfire of Teenagers. He finally played Rebels Without Applause, which I had not seen in 2023. I was very excited to see Rebels Without Applause in 2023, and I would say I was left feeling a little bit disappointed in 2023 when he played, of course, The Telephone Rings instead. But in 2024, I finally got a chance to see Rebels Without Applause, which I loved. He also did play, of course, The Telephone Rings. The other two songs he played that evening, one was a song called I Am Veronica, a song that I thought was very snug. The second song he played that I had never heard before was a song called IX Love You. A song that, it was okay. I don't necessarily think it was the jugs. It was not a bucket. It was just sort of a song that sat there. I thought to myself, okay, lyrically, this very much sounds like, a Morrissey song. I think that this will be a passable, decent album track. But, at the end of the day, I really loved I Am Veronica, and I love Rebels Without Applause. So, I thought 2 out of 4 so far are very good. In 2025, in May of 2025, Morrissey announced that he was going to be releasing the second album, which at this point in time was now being called You're Right, It's Time. This is the album that he announced in 2023, the album that at the time was called Without Music, the World Dies. In May of 2025, Morrissey announces that he's going to be releasing this album first. He is going to leapfrog Bonfire of Teenagers, and in December of 2025, it was announced that he had signed to Sire Records and that the album was going to be released in early 2026. The album now was going to be called Makeup Is a Lie, and over the next several months, Morrissey releases a string of singles before finally, on March 6th, 2026, we did finally receive I guess you could say, the end of the Bonfire of Teenagers melodrama with the release of his newest album, an album that I'm very happy with, an album called Makeup Is a Lie. But when this announcement was made this week, talking about the follow-up to Makeup Is a Lie, I could not help but wonder, what is going to happen to Bonfire of Teenagers, an album that at one point in time, again, Morrissey was peacocking as the greatest album of his life. I wonder if this is an album that will at some point in time, much later on down the road, get released as, some sort of an import after, Makeup Is a Lie came out and the album did well and everybody seemed relatively happy with it. It was my hope. Now, I don't want to get greedy. I don't necessarily need a new album to come out today because I'm still living with the new album. I'm very happy with the new album, but I remember thinking to myself, all right, everything seems to be good. Morrissey's career's back on track. Most of the trains appear to be running on time. As long as he shows up for this upcoming tour this fall, I will consider us pretty much even. But I thought to myself, all right, everything seems to be going good. Perhaps we will get clearance now for this album to finally enter into the marketplace. So when it was announced this week that he was going to be writing, or is finished writing, his newest album, which is going to be recorded in January, it was something that I just found to be a little bit confusing. Not to say I'm not happy about it, because I am. Anything that is probably going to follow up Makeup Is a Lie is obviously something I'm going to want to hear, but something that I'm feeling relatively optimistic about. I just can't help but wonder, where is Bonfire of Teenagers? As I said a second ago, this album has become a myth. It is basically the golden plates of rock and roll. Now, there were, at one point in time, I forget when it was, but there was a point in time when Morrissey did actually release the entire track listing for Bonfire of Teenagers. The first song on the album was a song called I Am Veronica. That is a song that I did see live twice. Back in 2024, I mentioned it a second ago. That was probably my second favorite of the of the 4 songs that Morrissey played in 2024. My favorite of the songs that I had not heard up until that point in time. The second song on the album is the single Rebels Without Applause, a song that I loved when it came out. I still do. I still love that song. I still go back and listen to that single all the time. I love the artwork on that single. I love the picture of Morrissey wearing the Ramones t-shirt as a young lad. The third song on the album is a song that I've seen on YouTube via a couple people's shitty phone recordings. This was a song that he was playing over, I believe, in the UK and Europe at least a few times. The song is called Kerouac's Crack. A song that, as far as I could tell, again, based on sort of people's phone recordings, was a song that didn't necessarily leap right out at me, but a song that I thought was relatively passable. I am a fan of Jack Kerouac. I have my copy of On the Road right here, my well-weathered, read several times copy of On the Road, probably one of the greatest books of all time, something that if you are a traveler at heart, something you can easily relate to. The fourth song on the album is one that I've never heard any rendition of, called Ha Ha Harlem. Same can be said with the fifth song, I Live in Oblivion. I have not heard a single version of that song as well. The next song after that is the title track, Bonfire of Teenagers, which of course was written about the 2017 Manchester Arena bombing. Morrissey would later refer to that event as Britain's 9/11, and a tragedy that saw 22 young people killed at an Ariana Grande concert. I think 22 is even more than Ariana Grande has killed with her music. The next song after that is a song called My Funeral, another song I've not heard any rendition of at all. The song after that is Diana Dors. Diana Dors, if you are unfamiliar, was a British actress, oftentimes referred to as the UK's answer to Marilyn Monroe. The song I X Love You, a song I did see live in 2024. I thought it was okay. Not necessarily as good as I Am Veronica, and certainly not as good as Rebels Without Applause. Of course, The Telephone Rings. I just do not like that song. During the interview on Fox 5 in New York City, Morrissey played a live version of that song on television at the time. I could not understand why it was that he was plugging that song so hard. I just do not like that song. Play Rebels Without Applause, Steve. Come on! Last song on the album is a song called Saint in a Stained Glass Window, another song I've never heard. I was looking up some of these songs online the other day, seeing if I could sort of figure out what some of them were about. The song Saint in a Stained Glass Window apparently is a metaphor for divine, uncorrupted purity, standing in stark contrast to the grueling reality of mortal life. Why is it that I believe that Morrissey sees himself as the divine, uncorrupted purity, standing amongst all of us serfs? Anyway, it was announced this week that Morrissey has finished writing his new album, the follow-up to Makeup Is a Lie. It is going to be released. It is going to be recorded in January and February in France. Joe Cicerelli is once again going to be twisting the knobs on the new record. That is something that you will not hear me complaining about, but what I am wondering, and I'd like to know what it is that other people think. Do you think, because I don't know the answer, do you think that Bonfire of Teenagers will eventually enter into the marketplace? Will it eventually enter into our grubby mitts? That is something that I am very hopeful for, at least moving forward. Again, I don't want to get greedy. I love the new album, Makeup Is a Lie. It is something that I am very happily living with. I have been for a couple of months, and I do not see that thing leaving my turntable anytime soon, son. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store like Friends of Sound in Eureka, California. Check back for Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. I've been plugging it for a while. This week we are actually going to put out the episode where we discuss the new Social Distortion album. That is something that I'm very excited about. The new Social Distortion album, although I would say that it doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel, it is certainly the best record that they've put out since 1997. So be sure to check back for that episode. And apart from that, You know, I feel like we are pretty good here. I'm not exactly sure how long this video is, but it feels as if it is at least 2.5 days long. So I'm going to get out of here. I suggest you do the same. So until next time, my friends. Talk to them.